You very much. Thank you very much, Tiernan and the NICE group for putting up with me. In fact, Northern Ireland has been putting up with me for 23 years now. I brought forgiveness education into Belfast in 2002. Just think how close that was to the signing of the peace accord in 1998, only 4 years. And I remember walking into one of the principal's offices and saying, well, I'm interested in reducing anger and conflict in schools through something I've been studying for over 15 years and have been pioneering as a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison since 1985. If I do the math quickly, I've been studying this now for 40 years. My goodness, where did the time go? And so I asked the principal, are you interested in implementing forgiveness education? And I explained what it was, which I will to you today. And he was very interested. And he said, but you will only last for 3 years. And I said, why do you say I will only last for 3 years? And he said, because no one who comes into Northern Ireland lasts more than 3 years. He said, that's been my experience. Once all the glitziness wears off and all the wonder of travel and the wonder of a new country, people get bored and they leave. So he said, let's do what we can for 3 years. And I said, sir, with all due respect, I'm going to give you 20 years. Well, I've given him 20 plus three.
Mhm.
So here you go. And what I find really, really interesting is that forgiveness education started in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And our forgiveness curricula have now been disseminated to over 30 countries of the world. And there's a publication, the first author is Hannah Rapp, R-A-P-P, in a first-class journal called Child Development that examines scientifically forgiveness education in 10 different countries, and here they are: Greece, Hong Kong, Israel, Iran, Northern Ireland, remember you championed it, Pakistan, South Korea, Taiwan, Turkey, and the United States. And they all applied science to their forgiveness curricula. And when Hannah Rapp and other authors, I'm one of the authors on this, applied statistics to what happens when the children and adolescents have forgiveness education, is that even though most of the curricula is learning about forgiveness through stories, where we don't push them to forgive, actually, we show them forgiveness. Statistically, their forgiveness goes up of forgiving others who've hurt them. And importantly, their level of anger goes down. I want you to think about this for a minute. When we first came in, remember, we were very close to the signing of the peace accord. And there were still the police cars, for example, on the streets of Belfast, all had camouflage painting. And I was told whenever you hear a police car siren going this way, automatically go the next way. And there were a lot of British soldiers on every other street corner when I came in with these very long rifles. And it was a bit intimidating. And when we gave an anger scale to primary three students, the little wee ones who are 6 years old, everybody, do you know what their average level of anger was? It was close to what we call the clinical level of anger. Think about this. They've hardly been in the world, and they had a level of anger on the average 6 year old, that would make a clinical psychologist worried. After they had forgiveness education, learning about forgiveness through stories, you know what happened to their anger? It went to normal levels. And across these 10 countries, that's what tends to happen. The students tend to lower their level of anger toward others, even if they've been hurt by someone 2 years ago in the family. You see, they bring that into school. And my interest is in creating a school environment and a classroom environment that's more open to peace and dialogue and getting along. And here's just one example of that. I was walking on the playground in Belfast some years ago with the school principal, and there were two P4 students, little 7-year-olds, two little boys on the ground having a fist fight, hitting each other. And the principal said, "Watch this." And we both went over, and he said, "You two lads stand up." In Northern Ireland, they actually stand up. In the United States, I don't know, but we're not going to go there. And they stood up immediately. And he said, "Are you two lads in the forgiveness program?" And without a word, I watched this. They looked at each other, their eyes brightened, they shook hands without any pressure to do so. And as the principal said, they ran off as happy as Larry. And he said, "My job of discipline has gotten far easier now that we have implemented forgiveness education." Okay? So here's a big question. Why forgiveness education? Why bother? Well, remember, I've been studying as an egghead professor the topic of forgiveness for 40 years. And here's what I find. When we work with adults or adolescents or children, when we have been treated unjustly by others, it's not that behavior that crushes us. You know what crushes us? The effects of this kind of injustice. You see, the effects take up residence in the human heart, and it leads to anger that grows, anger that becomes an unwelcome guest in the human heart and doesn't know how to leave. And when that anger gets large and can turn to hatred, it can lead to anxiety, depression. And you know who people end up not liking because of what might have happened 5 years ago? They end up not liking themselves because they believe the lie that what happened to them was all right. What happened to them was because they're not so great, and that's a lie. And when people have forgiveness education, or in adulthood, forgiveness therapy, they tend to end up liking themselves. And not only does the anger go down, but the anxiety and the depression go down. And we have more peaceful relationships, just like those two wee ones, those primary four students who didn't need discipline in the principal's office because they were learning about forgiveness. So, given how important forgiveness is, remember, it doesn't take away the injustices that all of us face. We can't build a time machine and go back, but we can get rid of the effects that can destroy us. We can get rid of the effects that actually can be thrown onto other people and destroy them. And we can create more peaceful classrooms, more peaceful families, and more peaceful communities. So, given that that's the case, I want to first define for you what is forgiveness. Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosophers, told us that whenever you talk about anything of importance, define the term first. And quite frankly, I find that many, many people misunderstand what forgiveness is. I bet you some of you are sitting there and you have an idea of forgiveness that's actually wrong. Okay, I just know that from experience and talking to many, many people in many different countries over my 40 years of studying forgiveness. And here's what forgiveness is. It's a moral virtue, as is justice and patience and kindness and love. And all moral virtues deal with goodness toward other people. Forgiveness is a unique moral virtue in that it is deliberately trying to be good to those who are not good to you. How outrageous is that? Think about it. You're good to those who aren't good to you? Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who in 1887 wrote the book, The Genealogy of Morals, thought it was ridiculous. He said, forgiveness is for the weak. The only reason people will forgive is if they want something from the other, like forgiving a boss to keep a job. But we have found that the paradox of forgiving is that when you are good to those who are not good to you, you benefit. But keep in mind four themes of what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not excusing what happened. You don't say, "Oh, I'm going to be good to you because you slapping me around on the playground, my supposed friend, every day. That's fine, no problem." No, it is a problem. Being slapped around was a problem, is a problem, and will always be a problem, even when you forgive the person. Okay? Second of all, when you forgive, you don't forget lest it happen again. I use the term you forgive and remember in new ways. Third, because this one gets me in trouble all the time, forgiving is not the same thing as reconciling. Reconciling is not a moral virtue. Instead, it's a negotiation strategy when two or more people come together again in mutual trust. And you can forgive and not reconcile with someone who keeps bullying you. In fact, a student who might forgive another student should go to a teacher or a principal and ask for help from those who are bullying the person. And then finally, and this is also important, when we forgive, we don't throw justice away. Forgiveness and justice grow up together. Forgive and ask for help. Forgive, ask the person to stop it. All right. But when you forgive, you're likely to ask in a gentler way, perhaps a deeper way, and perhaps actually in a more effective way. All right. So that's really what forgiveness is. And I've already shown you a little bit about what happens when people forgive. Just as one example in adulthood, we worked with people with heart problems, cardiac problems on a medical unit, and we screened them for the deep injustices they have had against them that might have happened 10, 20 years ago in the family. And these are cardiac patients. And we put them through a forgiveness program, and compared to a control group that had just the medical instruction as usual, their hearts actually ended up having more blood flow from the arteries to the heart when they started telling their story of deep hurt against them. And the physician who oversaw this, Dr. Douglas Russell at our University of Wisconsin-Madison, said, learning to forgive and getting rid of the effects of anger, which tends to narrow the arteries of the heart, helps people avoid sudden chest pains and death. Okay? So forgiveness actually had a major effect on a major organ of the body because it got rid of the psychological effects here. And here's another one. We worked here in Wisconsin with those in post-primary, just early post-primary, who are almost failing in their grades. And we screened them for deep injustices against them in the family. And once they learned to forgive, they went from almost failing to an average grade level. You see, think about it, teachers. If you have a student who has a throbbing knee because of a knee injury, do you think that students are going to be paying attention to you when you have a new math concept? No, the knee is going to dominate. What happens if someone has a broken heart because of injustices that are, let's say, suffered in the family? Do you think the student is going to care so much about the math when the heart is broken? Let's heal the heart first, and then let's see what happens. And basically, when we work with adults on forgiveness programs, what we do is try to widen the view of who the other is who hurt you. We have thinking exercises where you see the person is more than the woundedness against you. We work to, first of all, know the definition. You're going to try to be good to the one who's not good to you, but watch your back and see that person as possibly wounded, not to excuse, but to see a wounded person. And to see someone who has, despite their imperfections, what we call built-in or inherent worth. And depending on if they're faith-based or not, if they have a faith-based, we'll go there as well. And we'll ask, are you made in the image and likeness of God? Well, it says so right there in Genesis 1, yes. And then we ask, does that mean the one who hurt you is made in the image and likeness of God? Oh boy, people say, I wish I didn't know that. But that's the struggle, to see someone who has worth, who might be precious and unique and irreplaceable, and who's wounded, just like you are, which tends to soften the heart, where you then can stand in your pain without throwing it back to the other. And then we ask the person who's forgiving to do something good for the other, whether it's a kind word about the person to others or a returned email that you might not have done for a while, but something good. And we see once that heart softens in that goodness, people tend to actually reduce in anger, reduce in depression, reduce in anxiety, and they start liking themselves. See, and then they can reach out to others more forthrightly. Right? And so the science works and the curricula in schools works. What are the curricula? I just like to go through that for you quickly, okay? We have built forgiveness education curriculum guides for teachers from primary one through the end of secondary school, end of post-primary. We have 14 guides, okay? It took us 12 years to build those, and we had to hire professionals to help us. And it cost us 1 million United States dollars over a total of 12 years to build these curriculum guides that now are used in 30 different countries and were tested in 10 different countries. And I'm a terrible businessman. You know how much we charge for these curriculum guides? Zero. We give them away for free. And what we do, especially in the primary grades, is we teach through stories. For example, in primary 3, we use Horton Hears a Who. And we set up these curriculum guides so that you can teach about 45 minutes once a week for 12 to 17 weeks, depending on how far you want to go with it. But you clearly can fit it in when it's 45 minutes to at most an hour, one time a week for a series of weeks. You can double up and do it twice a week if you want. It's really up to you. And here's basically one lesson from Horton Hears a Who. You're familiar with it because remember the film Horton Hears a Who that was around? It was in the Belfast cinemas, what, maybe 10 years ago or so. And Horton, as a jungle animal, protects a little world of who's on a little flower. And the other jungle animals don't believe him because they can't hear or see the who's on the little flower. And so they abuse Horton. And what does Horton do? Does he stomp on them? Does he yell at them? No. He gently says in his forgiving way, I am protecting these little who's because here's what he says throughout the book. A person is a person no matter how small. You see, he's giving the message of what we call inherent or built-in worth. A person is a person even if they come to Belfast from Nigeria, or even if they come to Belfast from Pakistan, or even if you have Irish Catholics and British Protestants going together in the same school that you have revolutionized through NICE. Okay? You've done something bold. And people come into these classrooms with preconceived prejudices. Well, forgiveness education shatters those prejudices by starting with the basics. All people have worth. And we start in primary 3, a person's a person no matter how small. And the little ones sit there with their eyes aglow because they really like the Horton story. And we ask, well, is it true that all people are people regardless of their different characteristics? One might be better in football than others, or One might come to school better dressed than another, or someone is new to the culture. Are we still all persons who have worth and we're all special and unique and irreplaceable? And the little heads bob up and down, yep. Well, what if someone is better at mathematics than someone else? Doesn't that mean that person has better worth? No. What if someone comes to school and their daddy has a lot more pounds sterling than someone else's daddy? Doesn't that mean the person has more worth? Come on, children, right? No. Then we come to the punchline with regard to forgiveness. What if someone pushed you down on the playground and skinned your knee? Does that person still have worth? And the answer is yes, not because of what was done, but in spite of that. And that takes time, you see, to get into little hearts and minds so that children begin to widen their lens, widen their seeing, because there is a tendency to define people when we're gravely hurt, to define them by the actions against us. And what we want is to train the little minds and hearts through forgiveness education to see that we can be good to people because they have worth, but to watch our backs and to watch out and still bring justice along with us. And when we do that, that's when we see that dialogue is more possible. We see that cooperation is more possible. And we see that peace in the classroom community where NICE has more of a challenge than segregated schools because of all the differences that are floating around that could be the basis for condemning others. And Horton's message is, but a person is a person, no matter how small. And we have assessed over 100 teachers in the largest city in Wisconsin, where I'm a professor, over 100 teachers who taught forgiveness education, and 95% of them said this curriculum is easy to use. 95% of them said they become better teachers by using it. And 95% of them said they themselves, the teachers, actually become better persons themselves when they do this kind of teaching with the students. Okay, so in other words, it helps even the teachers to grow. And I want to show you just for a moment how forgiveness can fit in seamlessly, very, very well to your shared education programs, your relationship efforts, your restorative education programs. A big issue in these kind of programs is dialogue. Sitting down and talking with one another and talking out problems. Here's where I disagree with these programs. When students are frothing with a hate-filled heart, they can be very civil when they dialogue, but when their heart is filled with rancor, filled with excessive anger, filled with a resentment that won't quit, once they stop the dialoguing, there's a tendency to go back to the old ways of disrespecting, of being harsh in their language, or even in terms of their physical pushing and the like. Okay? What we need, drum roll please, because this next point is very important, we need to change the hearts first before we enter into dialogue. Because if the heart is wounded and the heart is deeply angry, dialogue won't be as fruitful as when we come to the table with a peaceful heart. But we can also reverse that and sit down together in dialogue where you can see a true person over there. But then we have to take the extra step, which is not being done in Northern Ireland for the most part, by then healing the heart by going back and see where the injustices lie. Get the student to do the work that a person is a person, no matter how small, even those who hurt me, so that the dialogue becomes more fruitful. We have ignored everybody in most societies the healing of hearts, and we've put too much on the behaviorism of dialogue. Here's just one example of that kind of frustrates me. We recently went into a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. Okay? And the maximum security is those who commit very grave problems, very grave crimes, and they're mostly in for life. They're lifers, as we say. And we screened 100 men for injustices against them. And out of it was about 107. You know how many reported deep, grave injustices against them prior to their crimes and imprisonment? 90% of them. One man was thrown out of his house by his mother when he was 11 years old, and uh, his dining room table at night was trash cans, and his bed at night was under cars for protection. Okay? And some of these men told me they became so angry about what happened to them in childhood that they perpetrated injustice on others. And when they had the forgiveness program, they saw the connection between what happened to them, the built-up of anger in them, and then them perpetrating anger on others. And you know what happened to them? After a 6-month program, they needed a lot of help. 6 months. That's more than what we're going to do in schools. They went from being clinically angry, anxious, and depressed to being normal in their anger, anxiety, and depression, where they could then dialogue with others better in the prison. And many of them went from maximum security corrections to medium that has less oversight, less intensive scrutiny. Why? Because they became gentler in their behavior. That's just an analogy of what can happen in schools. When you have disruptive students who just won't quit with that, suspect that they are hurting inside and they need more than punishment. They need more than timeout. They even need more than dialogue. What they need is first to heal the hearts, as we did in the maximum security correctional institution, and then work on their interactions with other people, and we have neglected it. Because most of societies today are behaviorally oriented. If we can get people to dialogue with one another, we're all going to be better off. If we can get them to not throw the pencils and to stay in their seats, all will be fine. No, because that's only temporary. Heal the heart first. And then I think you're going to get much deeper cooperation, much deeper peace within a classroom and actually within the school itself. And these curriculum guides are meant to be developmental. We start with stories like Horton Hears a Who, and eventually when we get to post-primary, we do have curricula that walk them through the forgiveness process themselves. For example, I have a book called Forgiveness is a Choice that's used in late post-primary, where they actually go through a book like this and forgive those who've been very, very deeply wounding to them. And again, we find through those 10 different countries that I went through, from Greece all the way through the United States, their anger levels go down. Even early primary grades, when we don't talk so much about forgiving others as talking about what forgiveness is and demonstrating it through stories, their anger goes down and their forgiving of others actually goes up. My challenge to you is, can you find space in your classroom and in your school to heal hearts as you engage in social programs, as you engage in shared education, as you engage in the different kind of activities for restorative education? Can you make room for the healing of hearts along with the dialogue and the civility? They go hand in glove. And if we do that, I think we're going to help these children and adolescents lead better lives. Do you know why? But when they're older and they can do even worse things to others than they might be able to do now, and they are unhealed in their anger, unhealed in their hatred, I fear for innocent victims who are now serving the consequences of what happened to them 10 years ago. And if we can heal the hearts now, we're protecting your students now and we're protecting innocent others in the future. I started in 2002. Do you realize when we started, we did P3 and P5? Do you realize the P5s are now 31 years old? I want to find some of them. I never thought about it until Tiernan asked me to do this talk, and I started thinking about it. Thank you, Tiernan, for being my teacher on this. And I thought about it. And I thought, we started a program of forgiveness with 8-year-olds. They're now 31. I want to find them, and I want to talk with them about whether forgiveness made a difference in their lives. They're already maturing adults when they were little ones before. Forgiveness definitely made a difference in their lives when they were younger. I don't know what the long-term prognosis is, but I'd like to find out. So thank you for putting up with me. And I'd like to see if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything at all.
Suppose, Robert, just to say in the chat, Kathy's contributed there and she said that she saw amazing results with forgiveness education in her primary 5 class in Belfast. Kathy, feel free to expand on that if you want to. It's great to have
Hi, Robert.
Hi again, Kathy. Hi.
Yeah, I'm working with Nicey now, so I heard you were talking. I had to pop on. I
All
never
right.
hear enough. Yeah, so I was probably the class you're talking about, P5 in East Belfast,
Yeah, yeah.
in 2002. So yeah, I don't live too far away from there, so it could be a possibility to find some of them. You never
I'd
know.
love to. I think that
Yeah.
would be amazing.
That little school closed, but they went on to probably local
Right.
post-primary, so I could have a think. But
Oh, I'd
also,
love to team
yeah,
up with you on that.
but
That
it was
would be so amazing.
my first experience of doing it, and I've used it. I think I told you that the last time we met, Robert. I've used it again and again in difficult situations in my life, and
Mm.
I swear by it, the process and just yeah, and I love, yeah. Robert recently shared really excellent results with me as well in women bullying in prisons and different things
Yes.
with amazing reduction in bullying. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful program and wonderful resources. So
Well,
I'd
thank you for
recommend it.
sharing, Kathy. And if there really was a way to find even like 5 of those
Yeah.
you really might have healed in terms of their
Yeah.
hearts, I
Yeah.
think that would make an amazing story.
Yeah. I think because
So,
they had been through very difficult lives,
right,
and they
right.
really did improve in front of my eyes over a year. Their their
Wow.
their moods and their concentration and just their self-worth. I just thought, wow, it really transformative over the year.
Well, thank you for sharing. See, that's actually why we went to Belfast as the very first place in the whole world to do this. We thought, where would be a good place? First, it would be good to be English speaking. And
Yeah.
we would say, then not too far away from the east coast of the United States, Ireland, Northern Ireland, first port of call, and have had recent conflict. The Troubles. And
Mhm.
so we thought, perfect. And so when we went there, it was obvious that this idea of the effects, because the Troubles were slowing down, as we know, not done, but slowing down. And these little ones, uh, actually, the P5s also had depression. We
Yeah.
couldn't, we couldn't measure depression with the 6-year-olds because we didn't have a scale sophisticated enough. So the P5s were suffering from anger and depression.
Yeah.
Think of that, 8-year-olds and they're already depressed.
And very angry, a lot of them very angry
Yeah,
children.
you see, because that's the deal. Their anger probably led to that. And you ended up not only reducing them in anger, but the P5s reduced statistically significantly relative to the control group that didn't have forgiveness in psychological depression, which
Mhm.
is sometimes very hard to treat.
Mhm.
And just learning about forgiveness helped reduce that, which got my attention. And that's why I've stayed with it for this many years.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Let's find the 31-year-olds.
Okay.
Robert, Laura, hi Laura, has also asked, this was practically, where are we able to get the resources?
Aha, that's a great question. They're free of charge on our International Forgiveness Institute website. It's called International Forgiveness, all run together, internationalforgiveness.com. Okay. And you can order them and we send them to you electronically. I also have two 1.5 hour videos to help train teachers. We did that deliberately for teachers. That's again free of charge. We send them over. And so you can watch those so you can get up to speed and get your confidence. But you'll see, we wrote these curriculum guides for the teachers. Right away, you'll see what the objective is for any given lesson, what you'll need for it. And again, you don't have to go out and buy the books because we give you the summaries of the books, summaries of the films that we had a retired journalist do for us. So you don't have to buy a thing if you don't want to. You can read the summary of Horton Hears a Who without buying the book. So the whole thing can be done free of charge. Go on, and then our director, his name is Mark, M-A-R-C, Mark Ladonio, will send these over to you. And I'm also only an email away, where if you have any questions, email me directly. And my email is my first and last name, Robert Enright, without the D there. As you can see, it's Robert Enright, numeral 1 at gmail.com. And I'd be delighted to talk with you about it. No problem whatsoever.
And just to say too, we'll share an email after this and also do a socials post. We've already linked the website in our socials post, but we'll do it again. Liana, I think, has a question she'd like to ask via.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. This is very interesting. I'm super interested in this topic. I'm from Canada, as you can likely hear, Western Canada particularly. And as you may or may not be aware, we're doing focused on truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous populations here.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
I work at our Ministry of Education, and part of our area is with our Indigenous schools, and trying to find the middle of all the treaty language to try and move things forward. And I'm curious if you've had done any work with those particular populations. And when I say that, I don't mean just the Indigenous people. I mean, forgiveness is all of us together, but probably focused in that realm. But I'm curious if you've got any sort of empirical evidence or data about how this kind of a program might work in those populations, or successes or challenges that might be culturally different.
Yes, we have done as an analogy, Leanna, a study with African American and Caucasian students in early post-primary in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And that is a highly segregated city where the African Americans live in their own areas, they go to their own schools, the Caucasians go to theirs. And we ended up having dialogues across the internet with them. And it can be enculturated by using stories that are particular to indigenous culture, which we do in Greece all the time. They read Greek myths, for example. And so they don't have to use all of our stories. You can supplement with others as long as they have the kind of theme we're trying to get at, such as if you're starting to introduce forgiveness, find a story where there's conflict between two adolescents, for example. And even if it works out badly, you can use that as a forgiveness tool by asking what might have happened in this story? How might it have ended differently if they appropriated forgiveness before they started talking with one another? And so we're used to enculturation. For example, we did this kind of program in the three largest cities of Iran, and we incorporated the Quran into that, okay, where they learned from their own faith-based tradition. So it's not that hard to enculturate. And what we found is when the students were able to talk with one another over the internet, you know what went down? Their prejudice went down toward the other kind of community. So ask me if I would like to work with you on this indigenous population. I think it would be perfect. Okay. And I think it would be pioneering, and I think it would work. Because what really tends to happen, I want to repeat it again, is that in forgiveness training, people tend to widen their view of persons, even those who are different from them. And they see that a person is a person no matter how small, no matter what their background, no matter how different they look relative to me, or their language expressions, or the color of their skin. They see beyond all of that to the depth. And this idea of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission interests me passionately because the Reverend Desmond Tutu was an honorary board member of our International Forgiveness Institute for years. Okay, he spoke at our very first conference on forgiveness ever held at a university in 1995, and he gave a talk again coming through the internet. He stayed in South Africa, and he even wrote a book after that because he actually wrote the preface to our book that came out from the conference. And so he was a friend of the International Forgiveness Institute. And the idea of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission fits very, very strongly with forgiveness, because what are we trying to do there? Heal from past injustices. And we don't want to make it just behavioral, where people are quiet and aren't killing each other. We want the hearts to be healed as well. And forgiveness does that. I'm
That's
with
great.
you.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah,
But
I'm with
what
you.
I do see as the parallel too between Northern Ireland particularly and this is we're dealing with generational
Right.
situations.
Generational. That's right.
That
That's
makes it that adds just another layer on to I guess maybe when we just use forgiveness in our regular
right.
lives. So
Yeah.
I'm very, very grateful. Thank you all for this opportunity that I was able to listen in. I'm going to be
I'm
following.
glad you didn't. I'm glad you're my teacher on this, because the idea of intergenerational makes it all the more imperative, because the accumulated angers, the accumulated resentments, the accumulated stereotypes against people can be very fierce. But forgiveness, you see, can break through all of that. And that's why we absolutely need that. Uh, Here's another example. As we know, the Holocaust in Germany gravely wounded many people who survived. Their children, the children who were not in concentration camp, have been assessed in terms of their uh, mental health, their emotional health. They were actually worse off, many of them, than their parents who were in concentration camp. That's how these effects can be poured into the next generation, that's poured into the next and poured into the next. And what forgiveness does is it stops the intergenerational transmission of the effects of injustice. That's why I want to do this with you.
I think, Robert, what was great as well for Northern Ireland and for any school is also the creative. A lot of the work is very creative, like we made a quilt, we did drawings. So it's like emotional regulation. You're expressing your emotions through art, which, all schools are now, promoting integrated or emotional regulation and creativity. And I do think that really soothes the kids when they think about their feelings. They can express them through drawing and through making things and through, it's not all written. It's a lot of.
Yeah, it's not all head stuff. Yeah, and there's songs, and yeah, we call them forgiveness quilts. So thank you for the reminder of that, Kathy. And then they could hang up the forgiveness quilt, as a reminder, you see. And remember those two lads who were in P4, they didn't need a lot of lecturing on their fighting. They needed a little bit of a reminder. And then their hearts brightened and their eyes brightened and they shook hands. So putting up a quilt is a physical reminder that we can be a forgiving classroom. So thank you for all you have done, Kathy. I greatly admire what you've done, really.
I remember kids fighting in the playground, and they would come in, and sometimes I'd think, are they just doing that to, for effect? But they would actually start towards the middle of the year. They would come in and just sit on the forgiveness quilt themselves and sort out their
Oh,
like conflict resolution in P5. I was like, adults find it difficult
wow.
to do that. It was amazing. And I kept thinking, are they just doing that? But that's what they just learned to do, is sit and talk about it and forgive each other and get on and find a solution. It was brilliant.
Amazing. Yeah, there's something about healing the heart first that's profound and extremely important that the world somehow hasn't seen yet. And that's why Northern Ireland and Western Canada can be pioneers in sharing this with the world. See, we're very interested in moving this into the peace movement because when I talked with someone from the United Nations, she said to me, whenever there's entrenched conflict in a society, the United Nations sees that even though there's peace now, there's a cycle to war that's about every 10 years in most countries. Think about that. That there's peace, then it rises up with war again, then it settles down, then it goes up again about every 10 years. I think if we can bring forgiveness into the peace movement, it might stop that cycle. And we're actually trying now, we're in dialogue with some people in South Africa, Desmond Tutu country, to work with at least two groups and get them to grow up with forgiveness in their own hearts, in their own families, in their own communities, and then come together. Right? Where I just talked with someone from Burkina Faso yesterday who wants to do that with me. Right? I'm open because I want to change the face even of the peace movement that talks about dialogue and repairing roads and bringing in food and all that's wonderful. But unless the heart is healed, we have cycles of war. I want to stop that. Forgiveness, I think, is powerful enough medicine to do that.
Yeah, Robert, can I just say, on behalf of everyone here, I think thank you so much. I think this is so deeply rooted in what integrated schools should be doing and hopefully aspire to do. And again, I'll make a point to get in touch with all of our school contacts after the fact to share this video and also to share your website and your contact details, if that's okay too.
That's
Um,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, and thank you, Liana, for coming in too. Can I just say,
Yeah.
an increasingly global platform?
Totally. It was really a privilege. And I am rocking my Belfast Giants
Oh,
Ah,
right.
sweater today. I know your team's playing for the championship tonight. So
uh-huh.
All
from
right.
one hockey nation to another, go get them.
Thank you very much. No, and thank you to everyone, really. I know it's a busy time of year. It's always a busy time of year, but particularly leading into the spring and summer. So it's just great to have you here. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiernan. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks,
I'm
Robert.
only an email away.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Take care.